Hey, and welcome back to the number one podcast in the world, the Cellarcast, episode 123. Except it's not actually the Cellarcast. This is the full version of the interview that I did with Greg Off, the former GameFan, DieHard GameFan staff member. It was a great interview. If you've come here from the cut up version on the main channel, this is the mostly unedited version. In the interest of transparency, a couple things have been removed, mainly just sensitive information and certain things like business related that Greg requested just not be included in the record, but this is essentially like 99% of our conversation. So enjoy. Greg was a pleasure to talk to, and this was a very fun addendum to the DieHard series that I did at this point about 2 years ago. So yeah, thank you so much for coming on to talk to me. Did you? So were you recommended the video by Tim Lindquist? Was it?
Yeah, I was chatting with Tim. I don't know, on Facebook about 3 weeks ago, whenever that was. He's like, "Oh my God, there's a guy who did a documentary on GameFan. You need to see it." I'm like, "Give me the link."
That's so great.
But I didn't realize that it was like a year ago, so that was crazy.
Yeah.
That he recommended it now. I mean, I talk to him all the time.
Wow.
But
Cool.
we must have been reminiscing or something. I don't remember what we were chatting about before he surfaced up that link. But he and I, we came up, we went through that hell together. So, we have like that shared experience.
Yeah. Well, that's good. I guess, I have a couple questions, but I'm not like a
Yeah.
drill sergeant about interviews. So just if you want to talk about whatever, feel free. But I guess to get us started, if you could just explain a little bit of how you're pertinent to today and your background with Die Hard GameFan.
Sure. Yeah. Absolutely. I'll try not to bore you too much with the details, but how I got involved with Die Hard, somewhat interesting. So I was at the time, and this was probably like 88, 89. I was working for my father. He owned an investment company in the San Fernando Valley. He owned a bunch of car washes. Living way beyond my means, was making about 80 or 90K a year, spending money like it was nobody's, like it was, water, just buying whatever I wanted, racking up all sorts of credit card debt, as one does when they're, late teens, late teens. And one of the places where I had found a way to spend my discretionary income was video games. At the time, specifically, I had discovered ordering mail order and importing games from Japan.
Yeah.
And that was way pre-internet. That was like you sent in a check or a money order, and you waited for like 4 months, and you weren't going to get the games or whatever. And EGM, I remember, had a bunch of ads or an ad for this one called Ultimate Gamers Club was the name of the place. So I was ordering from there, and somehow at some point I discovered that you could, downtown LA, in Japantown, there was a Kinokuniya bookstore that sold like PC Engine games and Mega Drive games, cool. Famicom games. And so I would drive down there to buy stuff. And the guy behind the counter, I remember writing a check for, I don't know, a bunch of PC Engine games or whatever. The guy behind the counter, he's like, looked at my address. He's like, "Oh, you live in Woodland Hills. You should check out DieHard Game Club." And I'm like, "What's that?" And he's like, "Oh, it's the store." He gave me the address. That guy was Kei Kabuki, by the way.
No way.
Yeah, he was working like selling games at Kinokuniya, but somehow I don't know how he got involved with Die Hard, but there was already a connection there.
Mm-hmm.
And so Over probably like a period of like 6 months, I spent a lot of time at that game store. It was like a hole in the wall
Yeah.
at a strip mall in the San Fernando Valley, and got to know Dave Halverson really well, and also Andrew Cockburn, who was working the front, and Dave's wife Julie at the time. And I spent a ton of money there, so they got to know me really well.
Mhm.
Long story short, my dad, his company, he owned a bunch of car washes, and one of the car washes had gas tanks that had leaked through into the soil for, unbeknownst to him, like 10 years, 15 years, and ultimately caused all this environmental damage. And unfortunately, his way of dealing with it was to pull a midnight move to Mexico.
Oh, wow.
And all of a sudden, I found myself without a job, heavily in debt. I was going to UCLA at the time, no way to afford school. And my dad had made me like a vice president of his corporation, and so I also found all of these creditors coming after me,
Oh God.
trying to get the money. So, long story short, I had to file for bankruptcy. I was in a really bad spot, and to his credit, Dave Halverson offered me a job. He took pity on me. He offered me a job under the table at the time, because I couldn't earn wages. Um, and yeah, I went to work for DieHard Game Club.
How
I
old
was
were how old were you when that happened?
So that was like probably like 88. So I was born in 69. So I was like 18, 19 years old.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a lot. Just
Yeah. It was definitely a lot to deal with as a teenager.
yeah.
Um, so I went to work for DieHard Game Club. This was way pre-magazine, anything
Yeah.
else, and uh, Tim and George, but mostly Tim Lindquist. Tim was doing at that time. Dave was advertising, or just had started advertising his game store, and starting doing mail order in EGM. And so Tim would do all of the ads that were going in EGM, and Halverson would like clip out, like, this is like so early days, like
Yeah.
he would go and clip out all these video game art and stuff like that, and put in like a manila folder, and I'd go drive it to Tim's house, and like with instructions on how he wanted the ad to look or whatever. Um, so long story short, like over a period of time, I don't, maybe a couple of years, that little hole in the wall store turned into a mail order business, just like some of the other mail order business that were going on. Um, Dave, was focused on importing stuff from Japan, all of those games. That mail order business was really successful, and those ads in EGM sort of became, I mean, famous, like, basically in the gaming space. People loved those ads.
Mhm.
And so we started to make these little catalogs that were like little mini magazines. And then at some point, Dave, like, he's like, well, I could do a magazine, just as good as anybody else. And so that's how DieHard GameFan started. We all just were like in the back of this little dungeon, uh, DieHard Game Club. And Tim, just like you did in your video, Tim brought his Apple, whatever, Macintosh, I don't know which one it was.
Uh-huh.
And literally, we built we did the magazine, in this little back area. There was like 5 of us, all-nighters, using pirated games, like literally, like,
Oh wow.
yeah, like that was back in the day when they had those like Game Hunter, like that you could like, there's like this little machine, and you could put a game into it and then download the game onto a floppy, and then like then hook it up and play it off the floppy. And so um, yeah, there was a lot. Like, I remember, I think the first issue of GameFan, there was a Super Star Wars for like Super Nintendo in there, and it was the game hadn't even come out yet. We did like this huge map of like one of the levels. And I remember like Lucas Arts like sending out like threatening letters, because like
Really?
yeah. crazy. Like we had no idea what we were doing, frankly, at all. Um,
How did you get the game that early? Sorry, did I miss
um,
that or?
yeah, well, Dave through GameFan met a lot of people in the industry, and like was able to convince them to let him borrow like EPROMs and stuff like that. I remember he paid $500 to get an early copy of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles before it came out, like on EPROM.
That's so
Yeah.
funny because
Um,
that's not the first time that happened. I know there's the story about I think it
yeah,
was
and
Resident Evil 1 or 2.
yeah. Uh, yeah, that was yes, that was Andrew, doing something really bad by putting it I think it got out like in China or Taiwan or something like that. Yeah, no, and like the other thing is Dave knew some of the editors, the writers that were working for like at the time like Prima Publishing or whatever,
Oh,
and they would be playing, doing strategy guides with pre-release code, and so he would get
mhm.
that code, and
Wow.
that guy, like he really like was such a like a petulant child but a big kid, and so like he would do anything to get his hands on a game, before it came out. That was like,
Wow.
you know, um, yeah, it's crazy. So that's how. So I just kind of fell into it, like literally backwards,
Yeah.
frankly.
Yeah.
Um, and all those stories are true. You said on your video about that. The people breaking. That was me breaking in my house and stealing all my stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
That happened to me. And what may you might not have known is that event was connected to the hooker event for CES.
It was.
Um,
Was it? Okay.
yeah, because so what happened a lot at DieHard, specifically with Dave, was he was very well. I mean, super passive aggressive and narcissist, all those things. But he would do this thing, and I think you touched on it. He would play favorites.
Hmm.
Um, not because he genuinely liked the person, but it was a way for him to create chaos and pit people against each other.
Hmm.
And so there was a period of time where I was in that role, and so like he would have you over his house, and for barbecues and hang out and play games all night and drink beers or whatever, and like would make everybody else like really jealous and insecure, and so that happened to me for a while. I was his favorite, and then at CS, we all got like this $500 stipend, and they all went and spent it on a hooker. You know the opposite, kept my nose clean, was there for work. I wasn't doing any of that kind of stuff, and of course they all got like super like in
Yeah.
trouble when we got back, and they were pissed that I didn't, that I wasn't
Oh.
part of that thing. So that was retribution on me for because I was the golden child, and
Yeah.
so to make it to try to get me, they tried to frame me for like stealing games.
Was
That's
that
crazy.
was that kind of inter-office politics
I
common?
guess so. I don't know what the fuck it was. Like their office insanity. Honestly, it was really. It's like so terrible.
Um, I have to ask you,
Yeah.
you touched on it a little bit, but what were your first impressions of Dave when you met him?
Um, like like I liken him to like a cult leader, like a David Koresh, like
Okay.
literally, like he tells everybody what they want to hear. He gets them, like he makes them drink the Kool-Aid, like they become true believers. Like I can't tell you how many times, like, oh, he told me, you stick with me, I'm gonna make you rich. Like you're gonna, like like he manipulates people. He used to. I don't know if he still does. I don't know really what's happened to him. In the last decade or two.
I
But
Yeah, I couldn't find anything. I don't even know if he's alive.
he is because I reached out to Julie. I don't know, about 6 or 8 months ago.
Oh,
In a weird feeling of sentimentality. I'm like, hey, because we're connected on Facebook. She and I. I'm like, and I mean, I always liked her. She was always the, a decent. I don't know why, I don't know how that worked, but
Yeah.
she was always decent to me. And so I just asked how he was doing and what he was up to, and she said he was fine. So I have
Okay.
no clue. There was like not to go all over the map, but
No,
there
fair.
was a rumor. There was like some big game dump like a couple of years ago, year and a half ago, and I can't remember the name of it, but it has a name.
Uh-huh.
Like I have to go search it, but the rumor was that was Halverson's like huge collection. Like he just put it up on something Paradise or something like that.
Oh,
Um,
physical like sale or
no, like it was like he all the EPROMs, all like it was like a treasure trove of assets, and
oh,
that was that he just like dumped it all and given it up to
okay.
preservation. Yeah,
Interesting.
yeah. I'd have to. I could. When we're done, I
Yeah,
could.
yeah.
Could shoot
Was that
this.
there was a Nintendo leak, I think? It might have
This was
been
like
different.
it might have been part of that, but it was like a huge like a treasure trove of like
Yeah.
games and assets and prototypes and EPROMs and stuff like that, dating like back you know generations. Anyway, I don't know. I don't know what's happened to him. And I've already forgot why we were talking, like
I
where we were
I
going.
I was asking about your first impressions of him.
Yeah.
You said
Oh,
he
my
he
first impression. Anyway,
kind
yeah.
of
So
sweet talked you.
was there, like he did that with everybody. He like
Mhm.
and the thing with going back to the chaos, like you just never, you never knew where you stood, like where you stood with him, because he might be saying all these lovely things, but the moment you turn your back, he and I've seen it. I saw it firsthand. He'd be sitting there like this as you're walking away, like
Oh,
literally, yeah. After praising and telling you, how lovely and wonderful you were, it was crazy. I
yeah.
was there from when I first met him, probably 88 until I think like 90, like 94. Um,
Yeah.
I myself, Tim, David Winding, who was Taco, um, left as part of that. We left and started at Dimension Publishing up in the Bay Area. So
Yeah.
we moved up and started Dimension Publishing, and that's when that whole lawsuit with Dave, he tried to steal us and all that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um so you were there for a couple at least a couple years of the magazine. Um
Yes. Yeah.
did the work environment change? Like I heard like the schedule of the way the magazine was put together was pretty hectic. Did it change at all or was it pretty consistently chaotic?
Always chaotic. 100%. Yeah. The there were yeah. Going back to like that whole like that just chaotic, um, unstable environment. There were that's the reason I was fired. Fired, which is another crazy thing.
Yeah.
I was fired because the reason I was told Jay Preeter had to fire me, and Jay and I are friends to this day.
Mhm.
Jay told me that I was fired because I was playing Need for Speed on 3DO too much, and Dave told me to fire me. Um,
Okay.
the reason I was fired was because at some point I stood up for myself and was like, I'm not going to work 48 hours in a row. It's too much. It's not healthy. I had a girlfriend at the time, and the only way I could see her was to go at night and wait tables with her, just so I could spend a few hours with her because of the horrible schedules with the magazine. And it was true. Dave would like he would literally have to wait until like you know he deemed it like right. Yeah, he would like a game that you were supposed to write about. He wouldn't let you have it until he was like beating it or playing it. This is insanity. Uh, so yeah, I would go wait tables at night and then come back and continue to work. But that made him angry that I wasn't there. Like I would leave. If people like left and then they realized that you left, like you were ostracized, like you were quote unquote a part timer.
Oh.
Um, yeah, it was so toxic, so toxic.
Wow.
Um, yeah, and so I think I was let go a couple months before, and we were already getting ready to leave, so I just didn't give a shit at that point.
Mhm.
Like we were, um, but the funny thing was, like maybe like 4 months later, I happened to be at like a Toys R Us, and I ran into Halverson and Julie, and Dave's like, again, he's so like if he didn't realize if he realized I was there, he would have ran the other way because he's like such a a baby. Like he can't do that, like
Yeah.
he's not, but like I happened like we happened to just like run into each other. And so he's like, why did you leave? What happened? Why did you leave the magazine? And
Whoa.
I'm like, you fired me.
Yeah.
Because you fired me. And then like he's like, I didn't fire you. Like that's like the kind of craziness, like gaslighting,
Yeah.
just insanity. Insanity.
Did you ever get a handle on why he was like that? Because it seems so many
I mean,
stories.
yeah, I mean, I don't I'm trying to remember if I like knew about his like what his childhood was about. I just, I mean, before he started DieHard Game Club, he was a used car salesman, like
Yeah,
literally.
that's what I
He
I
literally, yeah,
could
that's where
kind
he
of
met
figure out.
Andy, money guy, like, who was also a horrible piece of shit. Um, but that like he was just shady as fuck. I have no idea why he was the way he was. Um,
Uh-huh.
very charismatic. Um, and when he wanted to be, I guess, generous, but there was always like a an ulterior motive or a hidden agenda. And at the end of the day, it was really about him and nobody else. And he was like a big baby. He would literally have tantrums if like he didn't get a game on time, or if it didn't show up, or if something, something, I don't know, like whatever, if something didn't work. he it was it was crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so in within that environment, you were the editor.
Yeah. I
Yes.
was editor in chief for a few issues. Um, and at some point just editor, and then like there were really, the titles were
Yeah,
they,
that,
they
that's hard for me
yeah.
to put together.
Yeah. That like the very first issue, it was just he and I that did the reviews, like
Yeah.
Brody. Um, and yeah, at some point, like I kind of went over and like helped out with distribution. Um, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think we did everything, like literally. Yeah, I was there the night that acid event happened with Andrew,
I wanted to
but
ask you about
yeah,
that.
I did not partake in the coffee, so I luckily
Yeah.
missed out.
Well, so just because it's such a I don't know, it's such like a classic. Like that's what whenever I tell people about this, it's one of the
Yeah.
first stories that I tell them. So I'd like to know just what was your experience with that? What was your perspective on that day, night?
Um, well, I just remember, I mean, that's so long ago now, but I
Yeah.
do remember. I remember Halverson blazing. Like, I mean, he was like I probably walked into his office once or twice while he was playing, Cybermorph, and I just remember him like, oh, it's alive. Look, the colors, like the environments are so alive. It's like, like it's this most amazing game ever. Like he was flipping out. Um, so I don't. That's all I really remember about that night. I don't remember how we found out that there was acid in the coffee, but George Weissing also drank the coffee,
Mhm.
and he knew what an acid trip was, but from experience. And so he knew he was blazing, and I guess I don't know, maybe he figured it out, but he like wanted to call the cops. He was so livid and pissed, and wanted Andrew arrested. And for some reason, Andrew just happened to be a decent gamer, and David thought like he had to be protected, and like like almost it was really weird. Like Andrew could do no wrong in front of Dave because like Dave
Huh.
was afraid if he left, he was going to leave like he was going to lose like this special person who like knew games like no other. Like Andrew had this weird spell over Dave,
Huh.
and so Dave basically protected Andrew at all costs, which was super weird.
Uh,
Um,
Andrew was pretty young at the time, I believe, right? Was he younger than you?
yeah, absolutely. He was a couple of years younger than me. He was definitely like when I met him, he was probably 16, 17.
Is that legal in
No,
California? I don't think this is legal.
absolutely not. Not even. No. It's funny, like I think you mentioned in your video, like what happened to him. The last I heard, and this is probably, I mean, I lost touch with him probably 15 years ago,
Mhm.
and we're never close. But he was at Naughty Dog for a while, crazily enough.
Oh, I don't remember if I found anything. I might
Yeah.
have. I actually maybe I should have gone. I didn't feel like going sitting through 2.5 hours of my videos again, but
All right. Yeah, he
yeah,
went to Naughty Dog for a while, and then yeah, he found Jesus.
yeah,
Um, and,
yeah,
and I'm not. Yeah, I definitely lost touch.
yeah. Um, so we touched on the LSD story, but you mentioned when you kind of reached out and left your comment that was a lot more that happened. Are there any stories that you remember that you don't think most people know about?
Well, I can expand on some of the stuff. Like
Hmm.
you mentioned it, like that. So I one thing that I did do is I did all the press checks. So I would be the one going out, and we after we once we got big enough, we were printing in the Midwest at a printer called World Color Press, and he would send me out there, and uh, every month, like at least for a week, a month, sometimes a lot longer because they would not pay their print bill, and so
Yeah.
we would be on financial hold for days. I'd be just like literally sitting there at this huge printer plant, like at a Motel 6. The only thing in the whole town is Walmart. There's like nothing to do,
Yeah.
waiting for them to go on press. But yeah, like I was not. I had already we probably left like 4 or 5 months before that little bastard episode.
Yeah.
Um, and not to like to my own horn, but I would have caught that if I did it press check. That was one of like 10 times that I had to like stop the presses,
Oh,
um,
wow.
and and have them like once it got on press and realized that like there was offensive text in the magazine,
So
like
that happened often?
happened a handful of
A
times.
handful of
Yeah.
times because I felt so bad that I couldn't find the original like primary source on that, but there was that story that I remember that was like a game between I forget who, but one of the writers and the
Yeah,
editor.
I that was after they came in after I left, so
Okay.
I don't know those people. But that wasn't unusual for even Dave Halverson to write like just like terrible text calling. If you didn't know the name of a character in the game, you just call him like fucking shithead or whatever, and just like put it in there, and like and forget all about it. We go to press, and like I'd get on there, and like they would come off the printer, and I'd be looking and just making sure, because at that point I knew to recheck everything because
Yeah.
it would go wrong. So it happened over and again, hundreds of thousands of dollars, wasted because they'd have to like stop the press, replate them. We'd have to get new, redo it all. It's crazy. Um, yeah, I don't know. I mean, you're like every day was just insanity over there. Like the it wasn't just the Sonic statue. It was actually Tails and a Sonic. He bought both statues.
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
yeah, it's funny. But yeah, those were like the most hated they literally like were our paychecks for sure.
Oh
Yeah,
man.
yeah,
That's
that's funny.
so and speaking of paychecks,
Yeah,
and I'm, were you ever paid in a Sonic statue or
no.
or what was the
Um,
payment? I know it was bad, but what was your experience with it?
It was bad. I mean, it was literally like you said, there was every other week or whenever we got paid, it was like a mad dash. Like people would race each other to the bank because you didn't know if it was going to be, like if somebody got in front of you and cashed a check, that might be the last money
Yeah.
in the bank. So it was pretty crazy. Yeah, it just the yeah I got I mean I clearly was paid and was fine. I wasn't like Tim, who was promised an ownership in the
Yeah.
magazine. I didn't get promised any of that. So I was not concerned as much as he is. But I do remember the day he drove his he like came down to the office and stayed in the lobby and he wouldn't leave because he wanted to get paid.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know, it's crazy. Yeah, and then the fallout when we left with Dave. I wish I had the letter he wrote because he wrote a personal letter to us, um, telling us that we played him like a harp from hell, quote unquote.
Like a
Just
harp. Okay.
the most crazy thing ever, and like how we betrayed him, and he was going to sue us, and take get us out of business, and it just yeah, it was crazy. Trying to think of any other funny little anecdotes that might be interesting. Yeah, and I mentioned this the character on the cover that was my character.
Yeah, the
I
monocle.
yeah for and we I also mentioned this like when we did Hardcore Gamer. I basically like what GameFan's not around anymore. What are they going to do even if they tried to like do something? Um, but yeah, David promised me like at one point I found out that he was in talks to like maybe do like a real comic and like like a cartoon show, like license it out and all that, like you
I
know,
found
um,
I didn't put it in the video because I could not find any sources on it, but just randomly in some like weird knockoff Wikipedia kind of weird site
um,
with like bad grammar descriptions of like a monitor comic or a cartoon or
yeah,
something, and I didn't because I don't know what this is or who wrote this.
yeah,
So that was at the time that was I
they were
easy
working
wanted to
on
do
it.
that.
Yeah, he got a license. Yeah, Dave, like he wanted to be a toy maker at some point. He had like
Hmm.
this heavy metal doll that he had created called Mighty Right Way. It was like this crazy, like Hesher heavy metal doll, like glam 80s hair. And like he wanted like, he had made like a prototype doll of it and wanted to like, do like a cartoon and like like this whole thing. Like those pants that Dave, like it's crazy. Like the clothes that guy wore, like he wore was were out of, he would like wear bolo ties, just
Yeah.
and stuff. I don't
It's
know. So,
it's yeah, I think one of the most interesting things about like really to me the core of the story and the intrigue was this weird push and pull when I read all of these stories from all these people and all these memories, and they would list all these negatives, and they would say like I wasn't paid, I was treated terribly, I was overworked, yada yada, all this stuff, and then they would always cap it with like, yeah, but it was like the weirdest, most fun job I ever had. And it was,
um, there was, I mean, definitely there was a little bit of that. I mean, it was, the gaming industry at that time was like kind of in a renaissance in a weird way. It was very Wild West, and it was exciting, to be part of that, and then to get to kind of write about it and play games before they came out, and see the results of your work on the newsstands, like, and have that tangible thing. There was, for me, as a creative person, that was really exciting for me, and that's what I like. The day that the magazines would finally be done, and they like the bound issues would come in, like was such a exciting thing. Um, so that part of it was exciting for me. The fucking horrible people and dealing with Dave. I mean, they weren't all horrible. They were lovely people. Like good friendship, like Tim, Elaine, who you've mentioned, the
Yeah.
kind of like his mom. She was lovely. Dave Winding, he and I still stay in touch. Um, so I made some good lifelong friends. It's funny. I see some people saying like, "Oh, Dave gave me a start in the industry, and so I owe him for that." But I don't really, I don't. He did help people get started, I guess, in a way. But like, you make your own. You make what you get, right? I think so. Like, I don't know. There were definitely, it was definitely, it could be fun, but it was more horrible than fun, frankly. Like it was just
Okay. Yeah.
super toxic and unhealthy environment to be in, and you could only do so long before you either it's like like that Stanford experiment where the jailers like
Yeah. Yeah.
that's kind of like what that's kind of what it became. You either like became one of those, like you either succumb to like the psychology of being in that space and like kind of like um joined in, or you didn't. And the people that didn't moved on and were lucky and got out of that. And
Yeah.
you know like I'm very fortunate. I've been able to continue to make a very successful career in the game space, and still do it today. So I guess, there's that was just part of the path, I was on.
Mhm.
Um, and I don't know if I look back at like fondly on those days. But I do appreciate where I've come and having had that experience for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So was the just quickly to double back for a second,
Yeah.
was the kind of social experience in the office, what was that like? Like just the regular day to day, was it
It, it,
stressful or relaxed or what?
no, it wasn't relaxed. You were always on guard. It was very mean spirited. Everybody, again, he would pit everybody against each other.
Yeah.
And so you really, it was very territorial. You didn't know where you stood. So you never really had to felt like you had a secure footing. Um, the, that like kind of like mean spirited ribbing that people do. So there was a lot of people goofing on each other, but not in like in a bad, like in a bullyish way a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And he kind of egged that on. And so it was a really toxic environment. And you add all the stress and the late nights and the lack of this instability around whether you're going to get paid. um, it was not a good place to be in. And then you could fall in and out of favor really quickly. And so like if you got on the outs, then like you were ostracized also. So you'd come to work and the people who knew you were you were not on Dave's good side would avoid you because they didn't want to be labeled as like someone supporting someone that wasn't on
Yeah.
Dave's good. So it was really, really terribly unhealthy. It's amazing anything got done, frankly, because it was just pure chaos, literally.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. So you did not leave on good terms with the magazine then, really?
no, I did not. Basically, uh, we all left. I had probably, I think it was like 3 months. So I had left, I had been fired 3 months before we moved up to the Bay Area to start Dimension Publishing. So, that to me was like sweet retribution, like to go and like compete against,
Hmm.
compete against the magazine. And after that, besides just the threatening letters and the lawsuits and stuff like that, I had no contact with Dave whatsoever.
Okay.
I don't think I've spoken to him since. Yeah, which is interesting. Yeah.
Did you ever pay any attention to any of the later projects like Gamers Republic or Play?
Oh yeah. Oh totally. I mean, I'm a gamer, like in a consumer of games, and out of morbid curiosity, I definitely
Yeah.
wanted to stay involved. Actually, I kind of lie. I think I ran into Dave a couple of times at E3 and stuff like that, and we were just fake cities or whatever. Because again,
Hmm.
like he's like, you know, he's too much of a coward, like as a person to like, you know, when you're face to face to like man up, and
Yeah.
so he would just pretend like everything was great, very gaslighty that like that. um but yeah, no, I absolutely would keep up. I was hysterically thrilled when I saw that the magazine with the offensive text in it. I thought it was hilarious. And then it was even more like ridiculous to see like how he tried to say that they were sabotaged.
Oh yeah,
Which
I love that.
is hilarious. Yeah, anyway, yeah, absolutely. And as someone who kind of also like you know was doing magazines and magazine publishing, I absolutely wanted to see what he was up to and what they were doing and stuff like that. We took a different route. We went the kind of platform specific magazines. So we did
Yeah.
a PlayStation magazine and a Nintendo 64 magazine for a while and a couple others. But for me, it was really fun for even for a brief moment where we tried to make a run of it with Hardcore Gamer to like kind of like try to recreate the old GameFan days in terms of what the magazine was like and the quality and stuff like that, and having Terry do all the covers and the art and stuff like that. Just unfortunately, the internet decided that business was no longer relevant. You can't really compete with fast and free,
Yeah.
which is too bad.
So you guys just weren't interested in like, because a lot of there's kind of a mix around that time during the transition where some magazines kind of just got left behind and some made the transition. And you guys, were you just not interested in making the transition?
It was really frustrating, frankly, because Dave Winding, not to throw him under the bus, but he was he was the one driving the business, and he was like he's like he couldn't he's like didn't know how to make money.
Yeah.
Going digital at that point in time, ad sales weren't probably as big of a thing, and so he couldn't see the forest through the trees, and you know kind of dug his feet in and thought print was the continued way to go. And so um, at some point I left. And even when we started Hardcore Gamer, I was already doing what I do now. I own a creative agency. So we do marketing and advertising and branding and stuff like that for the mostly video game space. And so the Hardcore Gamer was more just like a passion thing on the side that I did with Tim. I threw some money at it. Um, but I wasn't like, at that point I was kind of more focused on this business. And that was my means of pivoting and staying relevant, was to move into this space. And I was fortunate enough to be able to leverage all the relationships that I'd made. Unlike Dave, I don't burn bridges, and I have a lot of friends and colleagues in the industry, and I was just able to, like, at that time, I started this business in 2004. I was able just to leverage all those like really great relationships with brand managers and PR people and whatnot. And I thought I was gonna like just write copy at home, like marketing copy in my pajamas. And over the last, which is crazy, 20 years, it's just I've grown into what I do now, which is a full service creative agency.
Yeah. Um,
Yeah.
uh, you mentioned it a couple times, but are you still in touch with anyone from those days?
Yeah. So Tim and I, after Hardcore Gamer, um, Tim actually worked with me at Off Base for quite a while, and then he got an opportunity to go to PlayStation, and so he went to go PlayStation. But he and I, we still work together. He heads up a lot of the the emulation stuff at PlayStation, so
Oh,
the PlayStation Classic stuff, and we work on a lot of those projects with him. So we are still connected, and work together. George Weissing also is at Sony, at PlayStation. Dave Winding, he and we worked together. He actually worked for me for a while here at Off Base, but then he retired. Trying to think who else I've stayed in touch with over the years. I think that might be it. And those are the stronger relationships that I formed because we left and decided to just kind of move on and start our own thing.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
fair.
I don't think if there's anybody else like from that original group. Like I definitely know. Oh well, Jay Purrier. Jay went to Treyarch, as you mentioned in your video, and we actually for about 7 years worked really closely with Jay on the Call of Duty games would go on and off
Yeah, yeah.
to studios, but we did all the social media for Call of Duty for about 7 years.
Oh, wow.
Quite a while ago, and so I worked with Jay really closely on that during the time when it was under Treyarch. Yeah.
Were there any inaccuracies in my videos?
Uh, I'm trying to think. Once like the ECM era, like all those, like I never met Dave Bernstein, so I was gone
Okay.
before he came in. So I can't really speak to that. And I think, you were not inaccurate at all. From you had really good research. Honestly, you did a
Thank,
great job.
thank you.
Honestly,
Thank you.
it was fascinating. It was really like kind of crazy to kind of take a trip down memory lane. No, it was just probably like the finer details for not being there. The little things like like the fact that wasn't just a song doll, it was a tails. It was like these two
Yeah.
statues, and like just I don't know, like there's probably lots of little tiny anecdotal things that I could fill in, but yeah, no, overall, it's like that is really what happened.
Yeah. I just tried. I mean, I didn't because the story was so fascinating, and I
Yeah,
was okay. There's so much information. I just have to
yeah.
like present it and try to organize it.
Yeah, yeah. Had I consumed them when you were putting them out, I would have been waiting for each one. It was great that it was all in one big block.
Yeah, to make it easier, I combined
Yeah,
them. Um,
yeah.
that's
No, your
and
timeline was great. Everything like it was
thank you.
fascinating.
That
You're
really
welcome.
that's because that was a project that for me was I'd been wanting to make it. I made oh my god. I wrote down I have a big note file of video ideas and way even before then like in 20 early 2021 or something I made a video about girls of gaming
Yeah,
which
I need to watch that. Yeah,
it's an older one it's a little rougher but I don't know if you were familiar with that project of Dave's
absolutely.
yeah
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't there for that. That was after my time, but yeah, I mean, he was a huge like misogynistic prick, frankly, and like he loved like it's so inappropriate now, but like back in the day, like the booth babes and stuff like that, like
yeah
oh, it's like a hog
yeah
and shit. Yeah, that's
we don't need to
crazy.
do this yeah and that was when I was just looking for a video on like an interesting gaming magazine. I thought, what's
Yeah,
this? And then going into that, I realized there was kind of an interesting arc to it because the first
yeah,
issue was like, oh, this is kind of actually interesting. There's like a lot of interviews, and then it just gets more and
yeah.
more like, and
One
as like
more
you start to look at the
crazy
credits, and there's like less and less people that aren't Dave involved, and it's just, I was like, who is this guy? And
yeah,
for the longest time, it was always like the Dave Halverson video,
yeah.
and then I started researching. I was like, oh, this is not going to be one
A
video.
rabbit hole. Yeah, it's a rabbit hole. Yeah, he did. He did write. So we would. He wrote like he was like like he wrote the majority of the stuff in the magazine or would rewrite. He would fucking go nuts if you tried to edit his text. He was terrible. He was a good like he was a good writer in terms of like he could write very like I don't want to say good is the wrong adjective, but he could flow with writing, but he did, he was I probably had like I don't know. Actually, he had an eighth grade level. There was like a way to tell what your. I think we used to put it through like some tool, like it tells you what level, like eighth grade, like what your
Yeah.
writing skill is. And his was eighth grade. I remember that now. But his, his typos, like like famous for like he couldn't write. He couldn't spell correctly. Um, but he would probably he was at least two or three of the review crew, so he would like he was Ernest Evans, and then like he would just jump in as other characters also.
Yeah.
And he would if he didn't agree with what we wrote, he would rewrite it.
Yeah.
um
And wouldn't he also
fun.
keep it under their name?
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely,
that was like, what? It's like, what?
absolutely.
You're not even gonna take credit for
Yeah, crazy stuff.
it. Uh,
So
uh
yeah.
um well, we're pretty close to being done, so if you could
No
just
worries.
give a quick explanation of what you're doing now and what you're up to.
Yeah. So I own a creative agency called Offbase. We are in the Bay Area. We do basically all sorts of creative services for our clients, from like huge, like big 360-degree advertising campaigns to building out like websites and video. And localization and a lot of technology stuff. We do so just a lot of like big items like experiential events. Like we did a big experiential booth at Gamescom for a VR company, to literally just doing game trailers. So it really depends on the client, but it's taking like sort of like that creative path that I was on, back in the magazine days, and it's kind of now getting to do like more kind of really fun outside the box type stuff for our clients, and work with all the publishers in the game space.
Yeah, cool. I was looking at your website and I was like, what are these they do this and this and this and you guys are kind of like a
Yeah.
very flexible depending on what the client needs.
Absolutely, 100%. Kind of that started. Like I said, I started literally as like just writing copy, and over the last 20 years, it's just we've had this organic growth, basically just helping clients where they need it, like kind of following the needs of the client. So, they'd be like, "Oh, you're writing the copy for the back of the box. Can you design it too?" And I'd be like, "Yeah, we can do that." And then like, are we going to do that? And like, so just over the years, like we've kind of really just, evolved and grown in, unique ways. So yeah, we do a lot of like, even now we still do a lot of collector's edition manufacturing. So we do like those big, crazy collector's edition boxes with figures and art books and what have you. So literally just, I don't know, localizing banner ads. We
Yeah.
do it's crazy. Do a lot. It's fun.
That
Still love it.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you. We're like a little ahead of I didn't know how like strict because I know I could see her at the office right now.
No worries. No, I'm, this is unusual for me, but it was also really interesting to to kind of relive and be able to talk about like this weird moment in time, in history that was so crazy and tumultuous. And, you know, like you really, it's a deep cut for, for someone to know about what happened. I know it's out there on the internet or whatever, but,
Yeah.
it was so long ago now. So it was fascinating to me to kind of, like I said, like to listen to your videos and kind of relive all that stuff and hear about it, and in such a like a unique, like a succinct way. That I felt compelled. Like I typically don't like leave comments and stuff like that on videos, but I'm like, you did such a great job. I wanted to say,
Mhm.
hey, like, thanks
Yeah.
for entertaining.
Thank you so much. You're the first person who was involved who ever reached out to
That's
me.
cool.
So that was
Uh,
whoa.
you clearly talked to Tim and Terry, yeah, or no?
No.
Oh, I
No.
just assumed you did. Oh, okay. You probably, because there were interviews for Tim online or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's just
everything
the
was
way.
pulled from interviews. Yeah. And
Oh,
blog posts and forum posts and stuff like that.
got it.
I'm flattered though that you think I did interview them.
I just assume the way like the way you wrote. Yeah, Tim's a great guy. You would love talking to him at some point. Maybe he'll.
That would be great. Yeah, I'd love to. My like pipe dream was like the reunion to get a bunch of people into a room or a call. Like they do after The Bachelor or something.
Imagine getting Dave Halverson. I mean, that guy, he's like Howard Hughes. Like, I don't like, that's kind of how I envisioned him. Like,
Yeah.
like, I don't even know if like he was such a consumer of games. Like, I can't imagine like what his life would be at with if he didn't still play video games, frankly. So I'm
Yeah.
just curious, like, what he's up to, frankly.
Uh, Me too. I could not find anything about him
No, he's
besides maybe I think I could find a like maybe the city he lived in, but I didn't want to include that because I figured if you're gonna be
yeah,
so off the grid that I couldn't find you, I'll
yeah,
just leave you be kind of thing. Uh,
sounds good.
yeah. I
Let
won't
me
keep
know.
you. Yeah.
Yeah, no worries. If there's anything else you need, you've got my email. Please feel free to reach out. And, I hope I was able to help out a little bit on my end.
Oh, this was great. This was more than I ever could have asked for. Thank you so
Cool.
much.
My pleasure. My
All right.
pleasure. Good to meet you, Tegan. Take
Good
care.
to meet you, Greg. Take care.
Bye.
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 Okay, that was good.